Hey everyone. This week we're back with another episode in our Expressions series, and it's a full body experience. Today, we're exploring everyday idioms that borrow from our anatomy, from the tops of our heads to the tips of our toes. These expressions help us talk about courage, embarrassment, exhaustion, age, affection, and everything in between. You might say, they help us get things off our chest. Now, as always, if you have expressions you love or ones that confuse the heck out of you, send them my way. You can find us on Instagram or Twitter at Lexiconned Podcast, or message me through the link in the show notes. Now, on to the episode. Picture this. You're standing backstage before a big speech. Your palms are sweaty, your heart is racing, and suddenly you get cold feet. Not literally, of course, but it feels like every part of your body is protesting, and yet somehow, that moment, the sweaty palms, the stage fright, the hesitation, it's all encoded in language. Idioms give us a shortcut to express the messiness of being human. And when it comes to our bodies, English gets extra creative. Welcome back to Lexiconned, the podcast that digs into the roots of the words and phrases we use every day. I'm your host, TJ. And today we're walking through 15 common expressions that all have one thing in common. They're rooted in the human body. Let's see how much history is hiding in your head, shoulders, knees, and quotes. Number 1, cold feet. Now you've probably heard this in every wedding rom-com ever. But cold feet is what we call that last-minute panic before a big commitment, sometimes marriage. The phrase likely comes from military slang in the 19th century, where a soldier with cold feet often lacked the nerve to go into battle. It also appeared in 19th century literature to describe sudden hesitation or cowardice, especially in situations involving financial risk. In one case, a gambler unable to pay his debts would claim he had cold feet as an excuse for backing out. And it's not just English. In German, kalte Füße bekommen means exactly the same thing. So apparently, anxiety travels well. Number 2, head over heels. To be head over heels is to be wildly in love. But originally, this phrase wasn't quite so romantic. It actually started out as heels over head, which appears as early as the 14th century in Middle English texts, like John Wycliffe's biblical translation, where he describes being physically flipped upside down. Now, over time, head over heels took its place, likely because it sounded more poetic and balanced in rhythm. And by the 1800s, especially in American English, it became a romantic phrase, to be head over heels in love. Now, never mind that technically your head is always over your heels, unless you're upside down. Love, like idioms, doesn't always follow good logic. Number 3, off the top of my head. This one's all about improv. If you say something off the top of your head, it means you're speaking without preparation. The phrase is relatively new, with origins from American English in the mid-1900s, particularly in radio and advertising, where spontaneity was often seen as clever or appealing. Early examples include quick-witted radio hosts or TV personalities tossing out unscripted jokes or remarks. It suggests a fast-moving thought, one that hasn't made its way deep into your brain but is ready to leap out like popcorn. Ironically, in French, there's a similar phrase, au pied levé, which means on a raised foot, or something that's done on the fly. All of them are ideas in motion. Number 4, long in the tooth. This idiom is a polite way of saying someone's getting old. It comes from horse trading, literally. You see, as horses age, their gums recede and their teeth look longer. A savvy buyer could estimate a horse's age by inspecting its teeth, making long in the tooth a subtle shorthand for aging. The expression made its way into general English use by the mid-1800s, often in humorous and teasing contexts. One of the earliest recorded uses appeared in an 1852 edition of The Southern Literary Messenger, referencing an aging bachelor who's gotten long in the tooth. And from there it trotted into everyday language, particularly in British and American commentary about aging actors, politicians, or anyone outstaying their youthful welcome. So if someone's long in the tooth, They're not a spring chicken anymore. Number 5. Elbow grease. This is one of my favorites. Elbow grease is what your grandma might have said you needed to clean the floor properly. The phrase first appeared in print in 1672 in a satirical work by English writer Andrew Marvell, where it was described as a substitute for actual polish. He says, 2 or 3 brawny fellows in a corner with mere elbow grease do more than all the chemical helpers. At the time, it was a sarcastic jab, suggesting that effort, not fancy products, was what really got things done. But over time, it shed the sarcasm and became a sincere comment. And by the 19th century, elbow grease was being used to describe good old-fashioned hard work. No cleaner needed, just muscle over miracle. Number 6. Put your foot in your mouth. Now, we've all done it. Said something embarrassing at the worst possible moment. Congratulations, you've put your foot in your mouth. The phrase likely evolved from the older British idiom to put your foot in it, which dates back to the 1800s and meant to make a social blunder or awkward mistake. The mouth variation began appearing more commonly in American English during the mid-20th century, and it added an extra layer of vividness. Now it wasn't just a misstep. It was a verbal faux pas. One of the earliest documented uses appeared in a 1942 edition of the Journal of American Speech, where the phrase was noted as emerging slang. Number 7. Give someone a hand. Whether you're applauding someone's effort or helping them carry a heavy box, you're giving them a hand. And both meanings have distinct origins. While today there are 2 phrases that are often used interchangeably, they started from different places. Lend a hand dates back to at least the 1700s, with one of the earliest figurative uses found in English literature where it meant offering assistance, particularly in labor or shared effort. The phrase gained traction in maritime communities where successful sailing literally depended on everyone lending a hand to the rigging. Shakespeare alluded to this collaborative spirit in lines like, "Give me thy hand," from The Tempest, though the exact phrase would come a little later. Now, give someone a hand, on the other hand, found its footing in the 19th century world of theater. In playbills and reviews from the 1870s, actors were praised for earning a rousing hand from the crowd. It began as applause but gradually took on a broader meaning of support, recognition, and even help. Both expressions show how our hands have long symbolized action, contribution, and affirmation. Whether it's lending or giving, the hand we offer says, "I'm with you." It's one of those idioms that feels timeless, because hands and help, well, they never go out of style. Number 8. By the skin of your teeth. Now this one sounds impossible because it is. Teeth don't have skin. But the phrase comes from the book of Job in the Bible, where he says, "I am escaped with the skin of my teeth." It's one of the more enigmatic lines in Scripture, and some biblical scholars think it may have originally referred to the gums or minimal flesh remaining around the teeth after suffering. Others believe it was meant figuratively, even back then. The phrase was preserved in the King James Bible, and over the centuries, it entered popular usage to describe any situation where someone just barely escapes failure or danger. It started appearing in English writings by the 17th century, and by the 20th, it was firmly entrenched in everything from sports reporting to spy thrillers. So if you've made your deadline by 1 minute, well, that's the skin of your teeth. Number 9. Give someone the cold shoulder. Here's a snub with a story. The phrase cold shoulder was once thought to originate from the practice of serving unappetizing leftovers, like a cold shoulder of mutton, to guests who had overstayed their welcome. Now, it's a vivid story, but linguistic scholars agree it's more myth than fact. The actual origin traces back to Scottish novelist Sir Walter Scott, who used the phrase metaphorically in his 1816 novel The Antiquary, where he described someone being deliberately dismissive or aloof. "She turned her back upon me in as cold a manner as if I had been a tinker." Now the phrase caught on quickly as a genteel way to describe social rejection, and by the mid-19th century, it was commonly used in newspapers and literature to describe everything from political snubs to romantic brush-offs. So whether it's an icy glance or ghosting a text, cold shoulders are still very much in style. Number 10. Keep your head above water. To keep your head above water means just getting by, emotionally, financially, or otherwise. The image is clear. You're not drowning, but you're not exactly floating either. The metaphor originates from the literal act of trying to stay afloat, where keeping your head above the surface is a matter of survival. Now, the phrase dates back to at least the early 1700s in English, often used in the context of financial struggle or moral endurance. One early example appears in 18th century devotional writings, where the faithful are encouraged to keep their heads above the water of temptation and despair. It's a timeless visual of persistence in adversity that captures the struggle of survival in any arena. Number 11. Break a leg. Now we're deep in theater territory here. Break a leg is what you say to wish a performer good luck, because apparently saying good luck is bad luck. The phrase's exact origin is murky, but several colorful theories persist. One explanation is that actors would bow or curtsy at curtain call, literally bending or breaking the straightness of the leg. So saying break a leg was a way of hoping for a performance successful enough to earn applause. Another theory ties it to the leg line at the edge of the stage. Now, crossing it meant you were going on stage and getting paid. So telling someone to break a leg then was a roundabout way of saying, I hope you get on stage tonight. One of the earliest documented uses of the phrase appeared in the 1920s in American theater circles, and from there it spread quickly as insider jargon. In fact, in German, they say Hals- und Beinbruch, which is neck and leg break. So the superstition isn't just ours. It's cross-cultural and linguistically acrobatic. Number 12. To turn a blind eye. The story goes that British Admiral Horatio Nelson ignored an order to retreat during the 1801 Battle of Copenhagen by putting a telescope to his blind eye. I really do not see the signal, he reportedly said, and continued attacking. Now, while this tale is a favorite among naval historians, it's debated whether Nelson actually said those exact words. Still, the story stuck, and it helped the phrase, turn a blind eye, gain traction as a way to describe intentional ignorance. The expression began appearing in print by the early 19th century, especially in political and literary commentary, where it was used to criticize people in power who conveniently ignored inconvenient truths. And that's where the phrase finds its cultural weight. Turning a blind eye often isn't about personal awkwardness, it's about institutional silence. From government to corporate scandals, it calls out willful neglect. Language in this case became a subtle tool for moral judgment. In Spanish, they say, hacer la vista gorda, or to make fat eyes. Now, that metaphor gets a bit weird, but the meaning is universally understood. Number 13. Get under your skin. Now you know that one comment you can't shake, or the jingle you heard once and now it's embedded in your brain. That's something getting under your skin. This phrase dates back to the early 1900s and originally referred to something physically irritating, like a rash or an insect bite. And like many of our phrases, this one transitioned from the literal to the metaphorical. In a 1921 edition of the New York Times, it was used to describe a persistent emotional annoyance. It quickly caught on in American pop culture, especially through blues music and wartime correspondence where emotional burden and psychological tension were expressed with raw bodily imagery. The phrase evolved to describe anything that emotionally bothers, unsettles, or deeply affects someone. Interestingly, it can go both ways. Something can get under your skin because it annoys you, or because it affects you more than you'd like to admit. It's been used in everything from classic blues songs to advertising jingles to romantic confessions. In modern usage, it captures the thin line between irritation and obsession, something you just can't shake. In Italian, they say, ti entra nel sangue. It gets into your blood. Now, that's a little more effective, but either way, it's more than skin deep. Number 14. To get something off your chest. This phrase is about emotional relief, finally saying something that's been bothering you. Now, the image it evokes is clear, a physical burden being lifted from the chest, making it easier to breathe and think. Its origins can be traced back to at least the early 1700s in English literature and correspondence, where phrases like, "take this weight off my chest," or "get this burden off my heart," were used metaphorically to describe confession or emotional release. Now, over time, these variations crystallized into the more concise, "get something off your chest," and it gained popularity in the 18th and 19th centuries, particularly in personal letters and later in advice columns and psychology circles. In Arabic, there's actually an expression that translates to "empty what's in your heart." Now, a little different, but the same emotional truth. Number 15, fingers crossed. Whether you're hoping your teacher forgets about that missing assignment or silently praying a job interview goes well, you might instinctively say, "fingers crossed." It's one of those expressions we say, and physically do, without thinking twice. One theory is that the gesture and phrase may have religious origins dating back to early Christianity, when crossing fingers was thought to symbolize the sign of the cross. By doing so, you were invoking divine protection, or possibly aligning oneself with another believer in secret during times of persecution. Another theory traces it back to ancient pagans in Europe, where intersecting fingers was believed to trap good spirits at the meeting point. By the 17th century, the gesture became more secular, symbolizing luck or hopeful outcomes. And as Western expansion continued, the superstition carried forward, even as its original spiritual context faded. The phrase started appearing in print in the early 1900s in both British and American publications. Over time, it evolved from a silent gesture to a casual conversational phrase. It's now universal office shorthand for everything from deadline anxiety to lottery hopes. And if you've ever used the crossed fingers emoji in a text, congratulations, you're part of a centuries-old tradition of optimistic superstition. So, from cold feet to long teeth, elbow grease to fingers crossed, our body-based expressions aren't just colorful, they're cultural artifacts. Each one is a small, vivid reminder that our language doesn't just describe our world, it mirrors how we move through it. Whether we're tripping over our words, sweating through hard work, or reaching for a lucky gesture, our bodies are the canvas for meaning. And these idioms aren't just clever. They're emotional, they're memorable, and they're carried with us, quite literally, every day. That's it for this episode of Lexiconned. If you enjoyed this linguistic anatomy lesson, give it a hand. Subscribe, review, and share it with a friend. Thanks for listening and for caring about the words and phrases that shape the world we live in. Stay curious, stay kind, and be well. As always, Lexiconned is written, recorded, and produced by me, your logophile companion, TJ Martin. Sources and additional credits are in the show notes.